Welcome to the best of first-person episodes from Phantoms and Monsters. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of all future uploads.
Growing up with Sasquatch. Though I've lived in Florida for just over 12 years now, I grew up in Ohio. I'm convinced that we had a Sasquatch that would pass through the area on a regular basis. This conviction is due to both sightings of it, them, and other evidence. I had actually emailed Autumn Williams with these accounts several years ago, after watching a few episodes of Mysterious Encounters, when it was in production. She never bothered to write back in response, so I don't even know if she received the message. Since then, I contacted a researcher in Ohio with these events. Sorry to say, I don't recall the man's name. He was excited about it when he replied back to me with questions, but I've heard nothing since. My parents and I moved into a house that was only a couple hundred yards from an abandoned railroad bed in Marysville, Ohio, when I was 5 years old. It wasn't long after that we, my friends and I, started our forays to the railroad bed. During the summer months, the weeds there would grow far taller than we were. For us, it was akin to being in a forest. Each summer, we carve a path through, using sticks to hack and slash at the weeds, cutting out a narrow, curving path in a larger open area where we'd gather to talk and whan it. When the Sasquatch first turned up, or, I should say, when we first noticed it, we were still young. We had no idea what was there. We felt that something was there on occasion, watching us. But for a long time we saw nothing. Then one of my friends reported having seen something large and hairy there one night. He saw it from a distance and only briefly. The rest of us didn't take him too seriously at first. He kept hounding us with it, though. Then another friend, a girl whose grandparents lived in the lot adjoining the railroad bed, saw something one night. She mostly lived with her grandparents due to family issues, and her bedroom window looked right out at the old railroad bed. Having a second report of something large and hairy up there at night made us all take it more seriously. Still, we were young and stupid. And the railroad bed was our place to go to get away from our parents. It was our place. We weren't going to give it up easily. Being so young still, we had no idea what we had. We started calling it a troll, as we never had the impression that it was there full time. So, we learned to live with it. It's been suggested to me before, upon sharing these events, that the Sasquatch may have been young itself. I don't know. Several years went by. We were easing into our early teens. That's when things started to pick up. Maybe there was a juvenile. Maybe it was just watching us grow and decided that, while it was willing to allow young children to play there, it wasn't going to be so tolerant of older children. But the girl who lived right next to the railroad bed had several more nighttime sightings. She was actually so afraid of what she saw that she convinced herself that she dreamed these, rather than truly admit that there was something there. I had 3 sightings of them over the years. She was with me for the first. We were in her grandparents' yard, walking up the short, gentle hill to the railroad bed. She froze and put her arm across my chest, stopping me. I looked at her. She was staring, open-mouthed and wide-eyed, pointing straight ahead. Through a narrow gap in the weeds, I saw what looked like the head and shoulders of a large humanoid figure with dark black hair. It was either sitting or crouched, holding perfectly still. We were seeing its profile. We backed slowly down the hill until it was out of sight, then turned and ran. After that, she refused to ever go back up there. Not even as part of a group. The following day, we told another friend. He wanted to see the spot where the creature had been seen. It was broad daylight, so I took him up there, albeit reluctantly. The only sign we saw of it was a large patch of flattened grasses where it had been. Somewhere in there, he and I also found what we referred to as the Vine Cave, which I now believe to have been a nest. From our point of view, it simply popped into existence literally overnight in the large, open area we carved. He and I actually crawled into it a few times, but always felt very uncomfortable in it, and always left quickly. Not long after the discovery of the Vine Cave, a couple of rival kids destroyed it, thinking we built it. I think that may have well caused the increase in encounters with the Sasquatch and its attempts to chase us away. My second and third sightings were spaced out over the next few years. Each time I saw it was in broad daylight. I was in our driveway, pulling weeds that were growing up through the gravel. Movement from up at the railroad bed caught my attention. I looked up there to see a tall, humanoid being with long arms walking along the hill, moving to my right. It was covered in dark black hair. I've always suspected it was the same creature I saw on my first sighting, but don't know for sure. I watched it walk for a few seconds until it was blocked from view by a neighbor's storage shed. Then I turned and ran into the house. I didn't go back up to the railroad bed for weeks. My third sighting was from a far greater distance. On the other side of the railroad bed was a fenced-in area of cow pasture and the local water tower. Beyond that was a trailer court. I was in our upstairs back bedroom one afternoon, again, during broad daylight. I saw what I first took to be a rolled-up rug by a trash can back in the trailer court. I could just barely see it, due to the distance. I looked away, and then looked back. What I was seeing seemed shorter, as if it had sagged, or crouched. I kept looking away, and then looked back, wanting to see if it moved. I couldn't tell if it was moving or not. Finally, I looked away for about 10 minutes. When I looked back, whatever it had been was gone. Another friend of mine lived in a house just beyond the far side of the trailer court. A wooden privacy fence divided his backyard from the trailer court. He once told me that he and his family would sometimes smell a heavy, musky scent at night. They would sometimes hear what sounded like heavy footfalls outside their house at night. He said his mother even claimed to have heard a loud heartbeat on occasion. All in all, we were lucky. We gave it plenty of incentive to lash out at us. Luckily, it never did anything to hurt us. Just scare us, employing fear tactics. We were just too dumb and stubborn to pay close enough attention. Even after we'd all seen it. Aside from the direct sightings of the creatures, we had other evidence that it was there as well. Once, when I was in my teens and at the railroad bed alone, something that sounded very large was in the weeds and brush ahead of me, thrashing at the weeds, causing them to move and make a lot of noise. I thought at first it was the same friend who's wanted to go check out the site of my first direct sighting of the Sasquatch. About the same moment I realized that whatever was ahead of me was too large to be him. A rock about the size of my fist was thrown at me, just narrowly missing hitting me in the head. I ran and refused to go back to the railroad bed for weeks after. Next time I was there alone I was in the same place, and the same weed thrashing occurred again. Luckily, no rock was thrown that time. Another time that same friend who wanted to see the spot of my first sighting and I were at the railroad bed by ourselves. There had to have been at the very least 2 of the creatures with us, one on either side of us. Nothing was thrown at us, but the same weed thrashing noises started up to each side of us. Oddly, this time, nothing was moving that we could see. Both of us clearly heard the sounds, but couldn't see a thing moving. Still, after holding our ground for only a few moments, we both ran. This same friend also decided to step up our own claims on the railroad bed, after he had found a rock cairn built on our path one day. The cairn was small. My friend spouted his usual line of, "No freaking monkey is going to chase me away," and promptly kicked the cairn, scattered the stones. We gathered up new stones and built a new, larger cairn in place of the one we found. We left and went back the next day to find our own cairn scattered, and a new, larger one in its place. My friend immediately kicked it apart, and we built a new one, larger still, in place of the one we found. This went on for days. Each day we'd find that the cairn we built the day before had been wrecked. A new, larger one would be in its place. Each day my friend would scatter the new one, and we build our own, larger yet, in place of the most recent one we found. Secretly, I thought he was going back up to the railroad bed later, and building the new cairn we would find the next day, and he thought the same of me. Finally, after this had gone on long enough that the cairns were getting to be a bit larger than shoebox size, my friend decided to go one better, and sent Mark the cairn we just built. He told me what he was going to do and promptly unzipped his pants and urinated on the rock cairn we had just built. Afterward, we left and went to his house. We hung out on his front porch for 2 or 3 hours, talking, then decided to go check on the new, scent-marked cairn. The smell hit us when we were still a good 100 yards, maybe more, from the cairn. We knew what we'd find, and it scared both of us. As we'd been together for the entire intervening time, each knew that the other had not gone back to the railroad bed to do anything. The scent was an overpowering musk that was so strong it made us sick. Think skunk concentrate. We held our breath, ran in, saw what we knew we'd find, a new cairn that was noticeably larger than the one we built a few hours prior, and ran back out into clear air to breath. That stench lingered for days, but that ended the rock cairn war. There were other times, before and after that, when my friends and I would be at the railroad bed and smell what smelled like a skunk. We also once found what looked to be shallow, crude pit toilets. We saw what looked to be finger marks in the mud, and suspected they'd been dug out with very large bare hands. Several of the toilets contained what looked to be human fecal matter, only far larger. The next-door neighbors we had while I was growing up were very wasteful people. They didn't believe in leftovers from meals. If something wasn't eaten, it went into the trash, not the refrigerator. Their trash was torn open many, many times. They went to the expense of having a 5-foot-tall brick wall built around the area they kept their trash cans in. There was a green picket gate on the front for the garbage collectors to open to get access to the trash. They also bought trash cans with locking lids. None of it did any good. Whatever kept tearing into the trash would sometimes open the gate, leaving it open, and knew how to unlock the locked trash can lids. I've often wondered if their trash wasn't why the Sasquatch liked that area, and if it wasn't using the railroad bed as a convenient staging place to raid both their trash and trash from the aforementioned trailer court. I have no evidence to support these claims. We were young and never thought to gather any evidence, something I kick myself for to this day. Having a Sasquatch passing those so closely so often didn't seem special to us because we were growing up with it.
Possible Sasquatch encounter near Tacoma, Washington. In 2011, I was working at the Lewis-McChord military base located south of Tacoma, Washington. I was employed at Public Works and assigned to the Environmental Department. I was part of a group conducting a study in the southern section of the base. There were several soldiers attached to the group for security. We had been out in the field all day and were getting ready to head back to the lab. About 5:30 p.m. we heard a distress call on the radio from one of the security attachments located north of our location. Then we heard gunshots coming from the same direction. The best I can describe the situation is that all hell broke loose. The civilians were hustled out of the area immediately. When we arrived at the lab, we were told by command that our department would be non-active until further notice. The next day I received a phone call at home from a lady I worked with. She was wondering if I had heard anything. I told her that no one contacted me, but I was having dinner later with friends who worked on the base. She seemed very concerned because no one was answering calls at the base. That evening I got together with friends who worked in other public works departments at the base. At that time, there was no official information available, but there were a lot of rumors floating around. The most prevalent rumor was that one of the security detail went off his rocker and started shooting at other personnel. We were all called back to work about a week later. We each were given a written statement that, despite the rumors, the incident was a false alarm, and that no one had discharged their firearm. We all rolled our eyes. Each of us had heard the gunshots and realized that the situation was more serious than what the military was stating. A month or so later I was collecting samples in the field and was accompanied by 2 soldiers for security. We were back in the general area of the mysterious incident. One of the soldiers mentioned that all of the security people who were on duty that particular day were no longer with the division, which I thought was very odd. I asked if he had heard anything about the incident. With a straight face he said that something was shot after it scared a group of soldiers. I mentioned that I thought soldiers were not authorized to shoot at wildlife. Both the soldiers snickered and agreed with my comment. I asked, what was it? They explained that they were never told what the something was, but there had been unconfirmed sightings of Sasquatch and other unknown man-like creatures in and around the base. This information didn't really surprise me since I grew up in Portland, Oregon and was well aware of the legend. That is about all I can tell you. I no longer work at Lewis-McChord, but still have several friends who do. I will say that I am more mindful of the cryptid world, especially here in the Pacific Northwest. I believe that the government and military are very familiar with these creatures. The sudden security boost during the incident and then the fact that the biological and medical departments on the base were put on hiatus leads me to believe that the military was in possession of one of these creatures. I have no confirmation of this, but my gut feeling indicates that this is what happened. Richard N.
Couple encounters Bigfoot on the Loma Prieta Grade Trail. I'm a Silicon Valley, San Jose, California, native, and have frequented the adjacent Santa Cruz Mountains all my life. This incident happened on the Loma Prieta Grade Trail in the forest of Nisene Mark State Park in the late summer of 2019. My girlfriend at the time and I were hiking on a Wednesday morning. There were already people around. This is a popular trail as it's a really beautiful locale. That said, there were also stretches when it was just the 2 of us. I think it's a 5-mile hike total, and we were about an hour in when my girlfriend had to relieve herself. There were thick trees on both sides, so we looked for a clearing on our right side. We saw not really a path, but an opening, and walked past the tree line, maybe 20 to 30 feet in. She wanted to be out of sight of anyone who passed by. I tossed her my backpack which had toilet paper, and she ducked behind a tree. I walked back down the clearing about halfway, but I could still see her. She's squatting and I'm just waiting. Like I said, I could see her the whole time. It was darker inside the trees obviously, but I could still see just fine. So I'm standing there with nothing to do but look around me. That's when I caught the movement of something on my left. There was a medium-sized tree with a very distinct, very dark hand on it. It was about 10 or so feet away. At first I thought it was someone wearing black gloves. I don't know why, but I immediately thought it was some biker pervert looking in on my girlfriend. That's when I saw the face peek out and everything turned upside down. I can't say with full certainty, but I'd say it was 7 to 8 feet tall, easy. I'm 6'2". I only saw half of it, but it was everything you would expect from a classic description of Bigfoot. Big black eyes, large flat nose, dark skin with blackish grayish hair. I could see only a hint of a conical skull. Really, based on nothing in particular, I feel like I saw a female. Not sure why, I just do. Anyway, it peeked back and forth twice. The eyes were mesmerizing, that's the best way to describe it. They felt like they were looking right through my soul. I wasn't scared really, but I was definitely in shock, like the way seeing a car accident feels like everything is in slow motion. And let me confirm what others say, there was no way I had the wherewithal to pull out my phone and take a picture. No way. I was totally engrossed in the moment. This was all in the space of maybe 20 or 30 seconds. The second time it peeked out, it looked at me for a few seconds, then ducked back behind the tree, but also sank like it was going onto the ground. That was the last I saw of it. My girlfriend finally finished, and when she came back toward me, that was when the fear hit me. Not like I was in danger right at that moment, but more like the reality of what I saw finally hit me. I quickly took her hand and pulled her back onto the trail. I didn't say what I saw, but I said we had to go back ASAP. She was confused, but I explained to her what I saw as we walked back, at a much brisker pace than when we came up. She believed me. She's Canadian and has an uncle and cousin who claimed to see one when she was growing up, so that was good. She actually wanted to turn around and see if we could find it, but I wasn't quite in that space just after it happened. I'd say I was generally a Bigfoot believer prior to this, but not anywhere near a fanatic or anything, and it's not like I set out looking for anything. I know people argue that if you have Bigfoot on the brain, you're more likely to jump to that conclusion in certain situations. I did not. In fact, the whole hike I was complaining to my girlfriend about my manager at work. Bigfoot was the last thing on my mind. I'm okay with what happened, but I had strange dreams for weeks after. My girlfriend thought it was a great story, and she'd tell our friends over beers and stuff, but I'm not entirely comfortable with people knowing. But like I said, I'm far away from it now to at least share it here. Yeah, it's possible a huge guy in a suit was out there at that exact time and in that exact spot, but I don't think so. I'm 99% sure I saw a Sasquatch. MJ.
This is Lon Strickler. If you like this program, it would help us if you would give it a thumbs up. Then subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notification when we upload new first-person encounters. We have many more to come very soon. And by the way, if you have a suggestion or an experience of your own, please leave a comment.